Welcome back to Scale Model Fix and another brand new video build. This time we're going to be taking a look at Airfix's 1/72 scale Blackburn Buccaneer 2SB. Now there is a review up on the YouTube channel and also on my website looking at great detail of what is contained in the box, so we're going to skip that part for now. So let's lift the lid, dive straight in and get on with the build. So this is not going to be a straight out of the box build per se, but I am going to use a small amount of aftermarket. One of the areas that the kit I feel really suffers from is a poor detailed cockpit, relying just on decals. So we've got the Eduard Etch set there, some FOD covers from Quick Boost and a couple of aftermarket decal sheets. I've not decided by any means on what the markings this one's going to be, so I'll have a look at those as the video progresses. So the Airfix parts are contained in a single large bag, so let's open this and get on with our build. So these are the sprues that are unique to the RAF version, with the bulge Bombay and some weaponry. They feel a little bit slimy, so might benefit from a wash. Bit of mould release agent, canopy and clear parts, and the main bits of plastic, so we're just checking that there's no parts broken off and lying in the bag. Decal sheet's fine, printed by Cartograph, but as I was saying in the opening sequence of the video, the cockpit is really let down by what are some really terrible decals. So moving on to the build, and the first stage of the assembly sequence, not unsurprisingly, deals with the cockpit. So we're going to look at building these seats up, cockpit tub, getting ready to add our etch and bringing everything together in the first part of this video, hopefully getting to the stage where we've got this front fuselage section joined together. So we're just going to remove the parts, the ejector seat as labelled in the instructions. So there does look to be two types of the seat in the kit. So I'm going to suggest that one's the forward seat and one's the rear seat. So we just set about cleaning up the sprue attachment points. Just using a knife just to trim everything off and just to make sure that everything is as Airfix intended, and we've got no sprue attachment points that will cause any problems with our seat once it's finished and built up. Stop it sitting too high, for example, not wanting the canopy then to close if we had the option to close that canopy glass. So just using the blade there, and then we're going to use sanding stick just to clean up those seams. Nothing major, just making sure the mating surface, we have got some very small ejector pin marks there, and they will stop the seat coming together, so they just need a swipe. As always, I'm using a Flory Models dual sander, sponge on one side, sand grit on the other, and that's the medium one. We've got the pins there, so we'll just check now just to make sure everything does go together and quite tightly, which it does. So it's always worth paying a few extra minutes just making sure that everything does fit at this stage and that we're getting everything in the right positions, because it just saves you a lot of filling and sanding later. And you might think, well, this is only a ejector seat, but if that was a fraction out, it might not sit correctly within the cockpit tub. I'm just going to trim off the very tops of these mounting pins because I thought there was a little bit of a gap there, so we'll just reduce the height of those. We'll have another test fit, and that's reasonable fit now. So we're going to come in, going to use as always Tamiya extra thin quick drying, straight down the middle, and a bit of pressure just to join everything together. We've got the seat cushion, which has got some moulded on belts, so we'll need to probably remove those as we're going to use those Eduard cockpit set, which does include some seat belts. So I'm just going to tidy these up. I'm not going to remove them just at the moment until we've got the seats completed. We might want to just keep those for a little bit of extra detail, or it might just be as easy just to cover them up with the etched examples. So we're just making sure that the seat does fit, which it doesn't want to at the moment. There we go, everything goes in place. So the nice thing with this is, with it being a cushion separate from the frame, we can paint the frame and the cushion independently, which will always make for a neater result, so we won't actually glue that in for now. I just think that's part of the sprue attachment point there, so we'll just remove that. Just going to use a marker just to colour in the bottom of the seat, and that's to signify that it's stage 1 of the build, because there are different part numbers on those seats. Now it's always handy to keep the tops, these are cotton bud tops, just to keep everything together so nothing gets lost. So I'll repeat seat 2 and then we'll have a look at what's next. So we've done stage 1, 2, 3 and 4, and we're up to stage 5. So stage 5 deals with what looks to be the nose gear bay being attached to the cockpit tub. Stage 6 then quickly following on, and we're putting a bulkhead on, everything coming together, and it's at this point in stage 7 we're going to look at starting to fit our Eduard etched set. Again, keep saying it, thorough and proper cleanup just ensures everything fits when the time comes. And the tolerances on these new CAD design kits is quite tight, and so if you leave even the remotest section of a sprue gate lingering, it could throw the fit out. You might not notice it at that time, and then later on in the build it's going to come back and bite you on the backside. That is just secured in place like so. And we're going to use some Tamiya white top for this, just so it doesn't dry too quickly as we're aligning the parts. Tiny bit of finger pressure and a bit of a wiggle just to make sure everything is good, and that's that bit done. So thankfully there is no raised detail on these sidewalls, which is going to help us immensely when we come to put the Eduard Etch metal cockpit details on there, because we're not going to clean anything up, we're just going to literally stick those in place. Next up in the instructions we're adding the rear bulkhead, so that's part D38. So bear in mind the kit is 70-second scale. The detail's a little bit thick and clunky, but it'll look fine. once we've assembled everything. So we're just making sure that this fits in its location, which it wants to, so that's good. Just catch this tab at the bottom. Just making sure everything does fit as intended. So let's just get a bit of glue in just to hold everything in place. Oops, it'll slip in there. There we go. Just give it plastic a bit of a slide just to bite, and then everything is fine. So we'll leave that to set. So the build's progressing. I've now removed the forward nose section from the frames and we've cleaned that up, and the fit is perfect. So that takes us up to section 10. And what we're going to do now is just build this instrument panel up. So we've got the control column and rudder pedals there with the heads-up display, and these awful decals, just furnishing that further. So we'll get that built up, and then it's looking as though we can start getting some paint on this nose section. So we've got quite a few little parts here. So we've got the cockpit combing. We're just going to clean those attachment points up and put this to one side. All looks good there. And then we've got the smaller items, so we've got the instrument panel. So we'll just clean that up. That's the instrument panel there. These are the rudder pedals, a bit crude. Realistically, you're not going to see those tucked under the instrument panel right at the front in a 72nd scale cockpit. Once they're together. And then we'll just set that aside to dry as well. So I'll get some primer on these parts now, and I shall get the information from the instruction sheet. So it's saying it's all 165, which is medium sea grey, I think, in Humbrol terms, and that's for the majority of the parts. But the ejector seat is looking a little bit different. We'll come to that. So we'll get those painted up, and you can join me back when we start looking at this wing section. Well, you join me back at rather a chaotic cutting mat. There's bits everywhere, and just off camera I've been working away on our Buccaneer cockpit. There's quite a lot of detail to go into there. So we started off following the Eduard instructions. Just remember, it's not compulsory to use every single piece, so just pick and choose what works for you. So we've been working our way around the cockpit tub, and we've done the inside sidewalls, and we're just getting to the stage where we need to do the same for the instrument panel and the pilot seat. So overall it's quite a nice, pleasing effect, certainly better than those decals that Airfix provided. So let's take a look at how we work with a little bit of Photo-etch and get this ejector seat and front instrument panel built up. So let's have a look what it takes to do this Photo-etch. So things that we're going to need before we start: tweezers, knife, and a file. This is Tamiya's diamond file. These market it particularly for Photo-etch. Tamiya bending pliers, just nice flat blade just to hold anything. Advantage to have one of these wax pick up pencils that you just touch and it picks up the parts, probably a bit heavy, and some PVA glue. So we're just going to start with this instrument panel. So we're going to locate the parts on our fret. Now usually with Eduard they make this up in a laminate, so we've got the instruments and then the bezels. So referring to the instructions, we can see that we want part 2 going down first. So we're just going to remove this by cutting through the little tabs. And then we need to clean these up. So we're going to hold these in our pliers and we're just going to remove the tab with the file. Doesn't take a lot, especially with the tools specially designed for the job. And then again, just on that bottom edge, like so. So we're going to get some of our PVA and we're just going to offer the instruments up just to check fit in the location. That's a perfect fit there. So we're just going to add a little bit of PVA. Just flatten that down a little bit. Sometimes it's good to have a flat surface, so I just use the rear of Infinity cutting. I think pencil doesn't want to work today. I've just got a slight bend in that, so we'll just push it down flat against a harder surface, and it is now totally flat. I'm just going to get some of our PVA. I'm just going to put a couple of dots just in there like that. And then we're just going to lay our Photo-etch part on top. Give it a press down. And the reason we use PVA is it does give wiggle room, so it gives you time to work. You got to, using super glue, you've got to get it right first time and it's stuck down. Now where this glue's come out around the edge, I'm just going to get a cotton bud that's been moistened, and we're just going to blot the glue away. Final check to make sure nothing has moved. And then we're going to work on another area of the model while that PVA dries. So whilst we're waiting for the PVA to dry, we shall now have a look at adding the harnesses and seat belts to these ejector seats. So again, the exact same methods of attachment apply, except this time we're going to use a small amount of super glue. So we're just checking if we do need to remove any of those little sprue tabs, I suppose we can call them. But we've managed to get that off quite nicely without needing any further work. This time we're getting a small amount of super glue, and our tweezers, and we're just going to pry the belts apart slightly, and we're just going to offer these up now and just check the fit. So ideally they want to go over the existing kit items, which they do. I didn't have any trouble on the rear ones, so it was just getting them splayed out enough to go up round the base of the head box, like so. Dipped in a bit of super glue and just literally held in place until the super glue bites. And then once that super glue's gone off, we can gently bend those belts into position. So you want to bend this very gently. And just get them to conform to the shape of the seat with your finger. And if you do it too rough, you're going to flake the paint off the belt. And then we're just going to get a small amount of super glue just under the rear of each belt, just to hold that in place. There we go. And then we're just going to work on this cushion. So this is a multi-part item, so we're going to remove some of our spray. And again, we're going to use super glue. Just make sure that while we're using super glue we get this perfect position first time, which we have. Just want to let that glue go off, and then we're going to just bend those seats in between, these belts in between the seat cushion. Like so. And then we've got the lap straps to go in as well. So a bit of a fiddly one, these. So they are quite tiny. And to use a tiny bit of PVA to add the lap belts. So we're just going to put a tiny dot in the location they need to be. And just nudge them into place. So far on this cockpit, I've probably spent a region of about 2 hours. But it is such a marked improvement over the kit items that it's well worth the effort. So we're now going to, while we're letting this all dry off, we're now going to return to our instrument panel, and hopefully we can put the next layer of laminate on there. So we're just going to put a couple of tiny drops. And then we're going to lower our overlapping panel into place. Now it's a good idea at this point, any PVA that comes through the holes, to just leave, as it replicates the glass of the instrument. And that's our panel. How well the camera will pick that up when you look, it's smaller than my thumbnail, but massive improvement over what the kit had to offer. So I'll carry on furnishing the cockpit, and then we'll come back and have a look at our final results, which will draw an end to part 1 of our Buccaneer video. So that's all the etch work now done on our cockpit. So we need to look at getting the fuselage sides together. So the fuselage sits in a recess that's clearly marked on the inside of the fuselage, and it also keys in at the area where the air intake would be. So we're just going to add some glue around these parts. Hold everything in place. And then we're going to offer the other side up. And the fit is perfect. So we just need to add some nose weight and join those fuselage halves together. And everything is looking really quite nice in there now. So the biggest challenge going forward with the rest of the build will be to protect this area and make sure that no damage occurs to any of the parts that we've added, especially the ejector seats. And probably the best way of doing that is to temporarily fix the cockpit glass in place with some PVA. So we've packed the front of the nose area. Airfix recommend 15 grams, I think there's more like 20 in there, and it's all gone in quite nicely. So it's been held in with a bit of super glue. Not put any accelerator or kicker in there, because the reaction of the accelerator setting the glue does create quite a bit of heat, and the last thing we want it to do is to melt the nose section. So we can now come in and just glue our nose together. We're just using Tamiya Quick Set Extra Thin. We're just making sure all the panel lines line up and everything does look as though it should be there, and we've not got any steps or anything in any of the joins. The Airfix plastic is very forgiving, so it is quite easy to sand, but why make work for yourself? So we'll set that aside to dry thoroughly. So with the fuselage now joined together, we can admire the hard work that's gone on in that cockpit, and it really does look a vast improvement on what the kit had on offer. Hopefully you found the information useful about working with Photo-etch that we've dedicated a whole 30-minute video to, essentially, and that you'll join me in part 2 when we get on with the build and get the rest of the airframe built up, hopefully around this cockpit section. So that draws a conclusion to part 1 of our Airfix 1/72nd scale Buccaneer 2SB video build. Hopefully you'll join me in the next part, but until then, please look after yourselves, stay well and take care.